Have you ever driven down a dark road and felt that something was off? Well, get ready, because today I'm telling you 3 stories that will make you doubt every curve and every whisper in the wind. The first one starts with a rag doll that isn't what it seems. I inherited the truck from my father, Hank, a legendary trucker who simply vanished into thin air on Interstate 40, one of those long, lonely roads that cut through the deserts of Arizona and swallow men whole. The Kenworth, painted a faded navy blue, was all I had left of him, a steel giant dented and scarred from countless miles. It was on my first solo run, on a rough patch between New Mexico and Texas, that my hand, fumbling for a dropped lighter, brushed against something soft and unexpected behind the seat. I pulled out a rag doll, old and worn, with button eyes as black as coal and a smile stitched with faded red thread. I then recalled a story my mother used to tell, one of those tales you half dismiss, about Hank's lucky charm, a doll he carried for good fortune. I held it on my lap, feeling its lightweight form and the scent of dust and endless road, and continued my journey. That night, in a truck stop motel in Phoenix, I swore I saw the doll, left on the passenger seat, slowly turn its head to stare at me through the motel window. In the days that followed, a constant presence settled into the cab. It was the doll, whom I, for some unclear reason, began to call Miss Molly. I placed her always on the passenger seat, leaned against the door, a silent companion. The changes began almost imperceptibly. Driving at night, fighting fatigue, I would hear whispers. They weren't clear voices, but impulses, suggestions that sprouted in my mind like weeds. Turn left here, onto that dirt path. Keep going where the asphalt seems to end. They were commands I, in a state between wakefulness and dream, obeyed. These shortcuts didn't exist on any map or on the GPS, yet they were always real, shaving hours off the trip. The luck, as my father always claimed, seemed to be on my side. The true nature of that luck revealed itself on a sharp curve in the Rocky Mountains, under a rain that fell like nails. The truck, loaded with grain, began to skid on a particularly treacherous section. An icy panic crawled up my spine. Then, the whisper came, clear and cold as a blade. Brake now, just a tap, and turn slightly to the right. It was an almost involuntary movement, my body responding to an instinct that was no longer my own. The truck corrected itself, sliding between 2 smaller trucks ahead of me. I looked in the rearview mirror, my heart pounding like a mad drum, and saw the truck behind me, a red Peterbilt, fail to do the same. It rolled over, tumbling like a broken toy on the wet pavement, followed by the muffled, terrible sound of metal being torn apart. I pulled the truck over further ahead, trembling, my legs weak. As the police and firefighters arrived, I knew, with a certainty that ached in my bones, that the Peterbilt driver hadn't survived. Miss Molly's luck had a bitter taste of guilt, a price paid by others. From that day on, the cab became a steel prison. The whispers intensified, no longer just driving suggestions, but comments about my life, my fears, my doubts. Miss Molly was no longer a silent passenger. Her presence was oppressive, a dead weight that watched my every move with the horrible placidity of her button eyes. I began to notice changes in her. Her yarn hair, once blonde, was taking on the same faded brown hue as mine. The shape of her cloth face seemed less round, more elongated, resembling the line of my jaw. And the fabric, once rough and worn, developed a strangely softer texture, almost like the skin of a newborn. The stitched smile, once foolish, now seemed to carry a hint of my own skeptical expression. The need to understand, to find a way out of this curse taking root in me, became an obsession. I remembered an old toolbox of my father's, stored under the bunk, full of junk and old papers. Rummaging through it, I found a logbook I never had the courage to read. Among notes on expenses and routes, there was an entry, dated 30 years back, that spoke of a woman in a small town in the backwoods of Georgia, called Salome. He referred to her as Agnes, a woman of old ways, whom he had deeply wronged. The notes were vague, filled with remorse, but one phrase stood out, written in a shaky hand: she made a doll. Said I would always have luck, but that the luck would come from an emptiness, and the emptiness would consume me. The debt will be paid with interest. A witch. My father hadn't carried a lucky charm. He had carried a sentence, a familiar entity created to suck energy from the tragedies it averted, accumulating a debt of pain that needed to be sated. And you, listening to me now from your secure life, have you ever felt something like this? Have you ever had the clear and terrifying impression that the pieces of your world are fitting together in a way that is too wrong to be coincidence? That an invisible force is rearranging the furniture of your reality while you aren't looking? Be careful, because sometimes you inherit more than property or an old truck. Sometimes you inherit a hunger that is not your own. Back on the road, every mile was agony. Miss Molly was no longer a doll. Her features were a grotesque caricature of mine. The cloth of her skin had a warm temperature, almost vital. One morning, while shaving in the truck's convex mirror, I saw with a horror that paralyzed me that one of my eyes was slightly more closed than the other, while on the doll, the corresponding button seemed more open, more alert. She was replacing me, piece by piece, stealing my essence to fill the void of her inanimate being. The whispers were now direct threats, promises that soon I wouldn't need to worry about roads or loads anymore, that soon I would have an eternal rest in her place, an empty seat on the passenger side of my own life. There was no more time to waste. The route to Salome, Georgia, was not suggested by the whispers. On the contrary, when I plotted the course on the map, the cab turned cold, and a palpable rage emanated from the figure on the seat beside me. The journey was a nightmare. The doll fought me at every turn, her whispers becoming silent screams inside my skull, trying to divert me from the path. Her body now had the consistency of raw leather, and her short fingers seemed capable of minimal, independent movement. She resembled me so much it was like seeing a miniaturized, demonic version of myself, an evil twin born of cloth and curse. Arriving in Salome, a dusty town where time seemed to have stopped decades ago, the presence of the doll was like a magnetic field of torment. Holding her tightly, feeling her false soft skin against my sweaty palm, I searched for Agnes's house. The older locals, with suspicious glances, pointed me to a small house with a blue door, at the end of a dirt road. The yard was full of withered, strange plants, and the air smelled of dried herbs and something indefinably ancient. I knocked on the door, my entire body a single thread of tension. The woman who opened it was ancient, with eyes that seemed to see right through me, directly to the aberration I carried. Without me saying a word, she looked at Miss Molly and then at me, and her lips curved into a smile devoid of any warmth. Her final words echo in me to this day, a dry whisper that sealed my fate. She said the doll had already eaten almost all of me, that my father's debt was now mine, and that there was no spell that could undo what was nearly complete. The emptiness, she said, needs to feed. And now it was my turn to become the rag doll charm for someone else. The road was my only companion that full moon night, a dark, endless strip cutting through the Nevada desert. Fatigue weighed heavy on my eyelids, each blink a battle against the darkness insisting on consuming me. My truck, an old Peterbilt that had seen better days, seemed to drag itself over the asphalt, every groan of the engine a lament. That's when I saw the headlights of a truck coming straight at me, in the same lane, a death sentence approaching at an impossible speed. My fingers froze on the wheel, my heart beating a desperate drum in my chest. The collision was inevitable, a certain and brutal end in the darkness of the desert. But at the last instant, a blinding light appeared from nowhere, a phantom truck, silver and silent, intercepting the danger and diverting it as if it were a leaf in the wind. It saved me, and I swore I saw the driver, a man in a leather hat, wave slowly before vanishing into the mist. Only later would I realize that was not a blessing. but the beginning of a curse that would forever alter my perception of reality. In the days that followed, a constant presence began to haunt me. In the rearview mirrors, on the most deserted curves, there it always was, the silver truck, maintaining a respectful distance, but never fading away. Its driver, Hank, a legend among truckers, had died decades ago in a heroic accident, saving others on the very same road where he found me. The old-timers whispered his name with a mix of respect and dread, telling stories of how he appeared on full moon nights to help the desperate. Now, however, he wasn't content to simply vanish. His apparition was a weight on my soul, a constant reminder that something was unfinished. I began to feel his anguish as if it were my own, a chill that penetrated my bones even under the scorching midday sun. The road became a nightmare. Every trip was accompanied by that silver shadow, an ethereal silhouette watching me with a disturbing intensity. Hank was not a benevolent ghost. His presence carried a dark urgency, an unfulfilled desire that echoed in my own thoughts. In dreams, I saw fragmented scenes, an old truck, a girl crying, an accident under a torrential rain. Gradually, I understood that he needed me, that I was the only one who could help him find peace. His final delivery, a cargo never completed, was waiting in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Amarillo, a place time seemed to have forgotten. The search for this truth led me to dusty archives and conversations with old truckers who preferred not to speak of the matter. Hank wasn't just a hero, he was a flawed man, consumed by a bitter rivalry with another driver, a man named Tobias. In a fit of rage and vengeance, Hank had kidnapped Tobias's daughter, a girl named Sophia, intending to scare his rival. But fate intervened, and Hank's truck went off the road on a curve near Flagstaff, taking both their lives. The cargo he never delivered wasn't an object. It was Sophia, whose spirit was still trapped in that warehouse, where he had hidden her before the fatal accident. You who are listening to me, have you ever wondered how many stories are buried in the roads you travel? How many secrets the wind carries across the fields? Sometimes, reality is more fragile than we imagine, and the echoes of the past can cross the barrier of time to haunt us. Be careful with the legends you laugh at, because one day you might become a part of them. The abandoned warehouse was a place of nightmares, with peeling walls and an oppressive silence that seemed to scream. Upon entering, I felt a cold that was not natural, a dampness that clung to the skin. In the darkest corner, shrouded in shadows, was Sophia's presence, not a solid figure, but a sensation of profound sadness, a silent cry echoing in the rotten woodwork. Hank appeared beside me, his form more defined now, his eyes laden with a regret that was painful to see. He showed me what needed to be done, not with words, but with images that invaded my mind, a journey to the original accident site, where it all began and where it all needed to end. I accepted the task, knowing I risked my own life by reliving their trauma. I carried them both in my truck, not as physical passengers, but as weights on my soul. The road to Flagstaff never seemed so long, every kilometer an agony of anticipation. The phantom truck followed us, a constant reminder of what was to come. As we approached the location, a dense fog descended on the road, and the memories of the accident began to manifest around me, as if time were unraveling. I saw Hank's truck losing control, I heard the muffled screams, I felt the impact that took 2 lives and condemned 2 souls to an existence of torment. At the exact spot of the accident, I stopped the truck and got out. The atmosphere was charged with an ancient energy, a pain that had not healed. Hank and Sophia appeared before me, their forms now clearer, more human. There was a moment of recognition, of forgiveness, a silent exchange that made the air tremble. Then, slowly, they began to dissipate, leaving together for a place of peace. The fog lifted, and the phantom truck vanished forever, leaving behind only the silence of the night. Since then, I have never seen Hank or Sophia again, but I carry the weight of that experience with me. The road is still my companion, but now I understand that some fairy tales are dark, and redemption doesn't always come without a cost. Sometimes, to move forward, We must face the ghosts of the past, even if it means risking everything we have. And you, on your journey, remember that the roads we travel are full of stories, and some of them may need our help to find an ending. The road was my only companion that dark night, the newly laid asphalt gleaming under the headlights like a black and sinister river. I had just passed a recently repaired section of Interstate 5, near Reading, when the first whisper came. It was nothing more than a scratch at the edge of my hearing, a low murmur that seemed to come from the very tires of my truck. I tilted my head, trying to make sense of it, attributing it to the fatigue of hours behind the wheel. But the whispers persisted, a constant stream of overlapping voices narrating stories I never wanted to hear. They spoke of an accident that happened right there, decades ago, where an entire family perished, their bodies left to rot in the ditch before being covered by the new layer of asphalt. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white, trying to ignore that insidious hum that now accompanied me with every rotation of the tires. In the following days, the whispers became my constant shadow. What started as secrets of the road soon turned toward me. They whispered about my childhood in Phoenix, about the time I stole money from my mother's wallet, a memory I had buried deep in my mind. They revealed that my father, a man I always believed had abandoned me, had actually tried to find me before he died, but my family hid the truth from me. Every word was a stab, a painful truth I didn't even know, and the road seemed to know everything, as if it had access to the darkest parts of my soul. I began to doubt my sanity, wondering if the isolation of the long highways was finally consuming me. That was when the shadows appeared. In the wet gleam of the asphalt under a light rain, I started to see shapes writhing on the surface. They were human silhouettes, distorted and trapped in the pavement, as if trying to free themselves from a prison of tar. One of them had its arms outstretched, fingers almost touching the sides of my tires, and I swore I could hear a muffled moan joining the whispers. The road was no longer just a road, it was a living cemetery, and its souls cried out for company. The whispers now persuaded me to stop the truck, to get out and join them, promising that the pain would disappear if I simply accepted my place among them. The most insistent voice was that of a woman who wept for her lost child, and she told me I could fill that void. You who are reading this, comfortable in your home, might find it easy to dismiss my experience as madness. But think of the last time you drove alone on a dark road, that feeling that something was watching you from the darkness. How many times did you dismiss a chill as the breeze or fatigue? The truth is, the world is full of dark corners we cannot explain, and sometimes those corners whisper to us. It's easier not to listen, but once you hear, you can no longer ignore. The urge to stop the truck became almost irresistible. My hands trembled on the wheel, and I had to concentrate not to swerve onto the shoulder. The whispers now called me by name, Jack, with an intimacy that filled me with horror. They knew my most secret dreams, my deepest shames, and used them against me. I remembered a conversation with an old trucker at a gas station in Bakersfield. He talked about a legend that the new asphalt in that region was made with an organic material, something taken from profane places, and that an ancient curse doomed the road to forever feed on souls. At the time, I laughed, but now the legend became my reality. I decided I needed to reach a section of old dirt road, where I heard the curse lost its strength. The problem was that the road would do everything to keep me on the asphalt. When I tried to take the next exit for Dixon, I noticed the road signs were distorted, pointing in wrong directions, and the asphalt seemed to stretch infinitely, like a nightmare that refused to end. The shadows on the ground became more aggressive, forming waves that tried to divert my tires, and the whispers rose to a deafening clamor, promising to reveal the final secret I feared to hear, something about my own death. I drove the truck with desperate determination, sweating cold as I fought the urge to yield. Finally, I spotted an unmarked detour leading to a dirt road, an old path that seemed my only salvation. The asphalt tried to pull me back, with shadows clinging to my tires like claws, but I accelerated, feeling the vehicle shake violently as it transitioned to the uneven surface. The moment the tires touched the dirt, the whispers ceased abruptly, as if someone had turned off a radio. The silence was overwhelming, and I stopped the truck, panting, my whole body shaking. I looked back at the asphalt road that now seemed harmless, but I knew the curse was still there, waiting. Since then, I avoid newly paved roads, but the whispers occasionally return in my dreams, reminding me that the road still watches me. And if you ever find yourself on a new highway, hearing something strange coming from your tires, do not ignore it. Because the road might be trying to tell you something, and once you hear, it might be too late to turn back.